Or do you want somebody who gets very creative or perhaps applies their mind? What is this concept of expert in the professional sense of the world? Well, let me pose this. One thing that makes an expert an expert. It's not when you step off the stage with the diploma in hand and the cap thrown in the air. Well, why do I know that? Well, maybe the market will define expert for me. Well, the market, your market, the accountancy market, says that an expert gets paid 31% more than a non-expert. 31% more in the job place. Well, what is an expert? How do I know if I'm an expert? How do I know whether I should be getting paid 31% more? Your marketplace calls that a certified expert. You call it certification. So if I'm certified, why do I know that? Because recruiters tell me that. And you'll see, actually I didn't include this in your handouts, but I'll give you the link if you email me. But the latest, one of these jobs in the money polls, but I've seen this with many recruiters. And then I'm sure that you all have probably, if you're in the CFA, CFP world, here's the comparative analysis of CFA, CFP article written. And there are many other articles like this, but they have, quantified the actual dollar amount. We've done it in my world too, in the law world. We don't call it certified, we call it you have an LLM. You have a Master's of Laws. So if you have a Master of Laws, you get paid, it's a quantifiable amount, how much more you get paid in the legal profession. In fact, you step off the stage with your diploma as a JD, you're not getting a job in the tax world in my closed universe. I'm going to get to that word later on, but closed universe of law. When you step off the stage, if you want to get a job in the tax world, to get an income at all, you will have an LLM or a Master's of Tax. It is a floor. It is a bar that must be succeeded upon. It must be passed to get that employment. So, so experts are made, they're not born. I'll be going through the actual literature that supports this. But if they are made, well, how long has this concept of certification, which will slowly eke its way into my world, in the lawyer's side, certainly the medical world has the concept of certification. And so is it 5 years? Is the CFP certification, which takes, generally speaking, about a year, maybe a bit longer, does that make you an expert now? I have a CFP, or I have a CFA, or my favorite group, AAFM. I have an American Academy of Financial Management, Chartered Wealth Manager. Am I now an expert? If I get all three, am I more expert than you? How long does it take? What does it take to become an expert? What the scientists, they're scientists because they follow methodology, they empirically test their work. Dennis and Nancy ask is, there are many ways that we accept in our different disciplines of becoming an expert. And certainly, law schools, we have a bar to become an expert, which calls passing the bar. Whether that's an expert of what we would have a discourse about now, but if you pass a bar exam in a state, you're now an expert because you've got a union card that says you can go practice law and represent somebody in a court of law. You all have a bar also, it's called a CPA exam. If somebody passes the CPA exam, they can now go represent somebody in front of the IRS, and they can sign audits for public companies and so forth. So, but just in that context of expertise, can we make the process more efficient, both in time and effort? And what we have examined, contrasting it against Socratic method, is that for most of us, and I'm sure you all have heard as academics that we are different learners. Some of us learn audibly, some of us visually, some of us even kinesthetically, by touch. Yes, there are people who learn by touch. Helen Keller, by example. We know through empiricism we can use regressive empiricism, and regressive application theory, through saying well, which learning theories hold water and which don't, by saying the very simple test of, if this is true, does it equally work for the blind population, for those who have sight issues, or for the hearing population, those who are deaf, hearing issues, or and so on. And we can start to negate what we might call the junk science from what is left over. I always found very interesting from the reports that for the last year and stuff we've been studying that human beings, through regressive application, we know that human beings are only born with two fears. How many of you all would have thought that possible? Would have thought that likely only two? Because most of us would think we have the fear of darkness, by example. That's not true. There's only born with two, because they've regressed it all. And they can show that in general, human beings, there's always exceptions to our general rules, but in general, human beings are only born with two. By example, sound, loud sounds. And number two, the fear of falling. I don't know why. We can speculate about why those are. It's not the theory. It's not my discussion today. But it helps to dispel some myths. And part of the learning theories that goes into creating an expert was, first, let's dispel the myths about what an expert is and so forth, and about learning in general. So you'll see schema, matrices, and mind mapping on the board. The one that I would also put up there, but it's not yet empirically proven or tested, it is still in the hypothetical perspective, is what I like, is neurolinguistics, neurolinguistic programming in particular for learning theory. And while we speculate, we do not have evidence. On these we have evidence. What makes an expert an expert? And if we're to employ, and I call it through the eye of the needle, I, like probably all of you, unless you've read the recent literature, thought that human beings had the ability to remember sets of 7 things. That's what I've always been told and taught over the last 15, 20 years of my teaching. And yes, I look very young, but it is an illusion. But all the literature, empirical testing, and so forth is clearly demonstrated that human beings only have four modes of information that can be held at one time in what we would guess call our RAMs, our short-term memories. Only 4, not 7. They have clearly thrown out the 7 theory in the last 2 or 3 years. In fact, our slots are only active, as you'll see, 20 seconds. Isn't that interesting as teachers to know that? Because you thought they could learn in series of 6s or 7s, but the human brain can only hold 3s and 4s. And one of those slots, of those 4 slots, guess what? It's managing the information of the other 3 slots. So you ever heard, you kind of as a professor know gut instinct, I can only tell you 3 things, or we walk into a thing, I can only say 3 things today because that's all you're going to remember. But the literature before said that we can remember 6 or 7 things. So how is that possible? Well, gut instinct was correct all this time for us as academics. They can only remember 3 things because the 4th slot is managing the other 3 slots. But then how can I ever learn things? Report. It was a Hewlett-Packard study. I'm sure in business schools y'all have studied this because it directly impacted business schools. This report was about business schools and whether